Before Egypt raised its pyramids, before Greece sang of gods, there was a land that invented history itself. The voice fades in over the sound of wind and distant water. A dry breeze brushes across a vast plain of cracked earth and reeds. Two great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, snake through the silence, shimmering under a golden Sunday. Between them lies a land once alive with human ambition. A place where the first bricks were laid, where clay met imagination, and where humankind took its first steps towards civilization. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers. And long before it became the cradle of empires, it was home to a people whose name still echoes like a whisper from the dust, the Sumerians. Who were they? For centuries, archaeologists have bent over fragments of clay tablets, squinting at strange wedge-shaped marks, searching for their story. Beneath the sands of southern Iraq, they found clues, temples, city walls, jewelry tools, all belonging to a culture so old, so advanced, that it seemed to appear out of nowhere. The Sumerians were not just the first to build cities, they were the first to dream of gods, to shape myths, to carve laws into stone, and to give voice to humanity's eternal questions. Imagine it. It's dawn nearly 5,000 years ago. The horizon glows orange over a flat expanse of mud and water. Men and women move among the reeds, their feet sinking into wet soil. They carry baskets of clay, stacking them brick by brick into the outline of something new, a city. Smoke rises from kilns. Children laugh near the irrigation channels. The sound of pounding clay blends with the low murmur of the river. For the first time, humankind is not wandering. They are building. Building homes, building temples, building memory. As the day brightens, the air thickens with heat. A farmer wipes the sweat from his brow and gazes toward the horizon where a tall structure begins to rise, a ziggurat, the heart of his city. To him, it is not just a tower. It is a bridge between earth and the heavens, a place where gods might listen to human prayers. Centuries later, the winds will bury his footprints. But tonight, under the same stars that watch over us now, his story begins, the story of a people who dared to turn chaos into order, mud into meaning. The question remains, who were the Sumerians? They were inventors, poets, traders, priests. They invented the first written language, cuneiform, pressing reeds into clay to record their thoughts, laws, and dreams. They mapped the stars, divided time, and even brewed beer. They were the first to turn imagination into civilization. Every civilization that came after Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, would borrow something from them, their myths, their systems, their sense of wonder. Yet for thousands of years, their names were forgotten, buried beneath layers of sand and time. Only in the last century did their voices return. Clay tablets, once silent, began to speak again. Through them, we learned the Sumerians saw the world as a fragile balance between gods and humans, that they believed rivers had souls, that justice came from divine order, that their kings were chosen not by conquest, but by the will of heaven. This journey will take us deep into their world, into the streets of Uruk, where markets buzzed with traders, into the temples of Nippur, where priests whispered to the gods, into the heart of Ur, where a young king once dreamed of immortality. We will follow their rise, their brilliance, and their eventual fall, not as distant observers, but as travelers walking beside them. Because to understand the Sumerians is to understand ourselves. Every story we tell, every law we live by, every written word, all trace back to this moment, to this people, to this beginning. So tonight, as you listen, let your mind drift back across the centuries. Hear the river. Feel the heat of the sun on ancient soil. See the first city rise from the mud, shimmering like a promise. This is not just history. This is human memory, our shared inheritance carved in clay and carried through time. Welcome to the world of the Sumerians. The first storytellers, the first builders, the first dreamers of eternity. The wind from the rivers carried the scent of clay and smoke, the same wind that once whispered over the first city walls of mankind. As the sun lifted above the plains of Mesopotamia, light spilled across endless fields of wheat and barley. Farmers bent low in the warm soil, their wooden plows pulled by oxen. The air was heavy with the rhythm of work, the scrape of blades through earth, the murmur of water flowing through irrigation channels carved by hand. Children laughed nearby, chasing each other along the muddy banks, their feet splashing in the shallows. Smoke rose from kilns along the river, dark against the morning sky. Among those fires stood a potter named Aaron, his hands covered in the soft red clay of Sumer. Each morning he shaped the earth into bowls, jars, and tablets for the scribes who carved stories into wet clay. His workshop was small, just a lean-to built from reeds and mud, but his wheel spun endlessly, echoing the heartbeat of a new world. He often paused to gaze beyond the riverbanks, where something magnificent was taking form. Every day new walls rose higher. Brick by brick, his people were building what no one had ever built before a city. At night, as the heat faded, Aaron would walk through the narrow streets of Uruk, carrying his clay pots to the temple. The air was alive with sounds, the chatter of merchants, the cries of animals, the steady rhythm of hammers striking stone. He would pass the ziggurat still under construction, its steps glowing in torchlight. He'd tilt his head back and whisper, "It touches the heavens." Sometimes he spoke to his wife as they shared bread by the kiln. "Do you think the gods see us now?" he asked. She smiled, her hands dusted with flour. "If they don't," she said softly, "they soon will." And in a way she was right. The great temples of Sumer began to rise, first in Uruk, then in Ur-Lagash, and beyond. Each city had its own god, its own priesthood, its own beating heart. The ziggurats became bridges between heaven and earth, massive towers of mud brick that gleamed under the sun like steps to eternity. By day, processions filled the streets. Priests carried statues of gods draped in gold, leaf, and linen. Musicians played reed flutes and drums as the people chanted hymns. Aaron would stop his wheel just to listen, his chest swelling with pride and awe. He wasn't just a craftsman anymore, he was part of something larger, something that would outlive him. As the cities grew, so did their hunger for organization. Scribes began marking clay tablets with symbols, tallies of grain, trades, prayers. The hum of the market became a song of numbers, trade, and faith. The people of Sumer were learning that the city itself was alive, breathing, growing, demanding care. Aaron's own life became bound to that rhythm. He traded his pots for barley, barley for copper, copper for new tools. His hands shaped not just clay, but the identity of his people. And when his first child was born, he held her high beneath the temple steps and whispered, "You were born in the first city of the world." Years passed. The streets of Uruk expanded like veins pulsing with humanity. Lamps flickered in doorways at dusk. The scent of roasted grain filled the air. Aaron's beard turned gray, but his hands never stopped moving. Even as his body aged, the city around him thrived, new temples, new walls, new dreams rising from the same sacred earth. One evening, as he sat beside the river, he watched the reflection of Uruk shimmer across the water towers glowing under the red sky. He thought of the days when all this had been only mud and silence. "We built this," he murmured, "from nothing but earth and hope." Far into the future, archaeologists would uncover the remnants of those same bricks, those same pots baked in Aaron's kilns. They would call it the world's first urban revolution. But for Aaron and his people, it was simply life, the sound of wheels spinning, the echo of footsteps on new streets, and the belief that what they built would endure beyond time. And indeed it did. The city of Uruk stood like a crown beneath the stars, its ziggurat gleaming under torchlight, its streets alive with the sound of prayers. The people who once shaped clay with their hands now shaped legends with their voices. And at the heart of those legends stood a man who was more than a man, Gilgamesh, the king who feared nothing except death. They said he was 2/3 god and 1/3 human. His strength unmatched, his beauty dazzling, his ambition boundless. Yet, in the stillness of the temple, when the hymns faded and the torches burned low, even Gilgamesh could hear the quiet ticking of mortality. One night he climbed to the roof of his palace, gazing across the moonlit city he had built. The Euphrates shimmered like a ribbon of silver, and the sound of distant drums carried from the temple below. The wind tugged at his robe as he whispered, "All of this, even this, will fade." His advisor, an old priest named Shulgi, bowed behind him. "The gods have given you greatness," the priest said. "Why fear what must come to all men?" Gilgamesh turned his eyes fierce yet uncertain. "Because I am not all men." And thus began his obsession to conquer death, to outrun the limits even the gods had drawn. In the temple below the priests of Inanna, goddess of love and war, prepared the evening ritual. The air was thick with the scent of incense and oil. Gold and lapis lazuli glimmered in the firelight. A chorus of voices rose in unison, chanting words older than any kingdom. The drums pounded like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Then, from the shadows, a woman stepped forward, her presence commanding, her eyes calm as moonlight. She was Enheduanna, the daughter of a king, the first poet ever known to humankind. Draped in white linen, she raised her hands to the heavens and spoke, "O Inanna radiant, one queen of heaven's dance, you lift kings to glory and cast them down to dust. Teach us mercy, teach us meaning." Her voice echoed through the chamber, soft yet eternal. Every word she spoke was a bridge between human longing and divine silence. Enheduanna's hymns would later be pressed into clay, her verses surviving thousands of years, her voice still whispering across time. Gilgamesh had heard of her. Once he invited her to his court. "You speak to gods," he said. "Tell me, is there no way to escape death?" Enheduanna met his gaze, her expression gentle. "You seek what cannot be taken," she replied. "Immortality is not in the flesh, but in the memory of what you create." He turned away, unsatisfied, his pride wounded. Yet her words haunted him long after she left. The story that followed his journey beyond deserts and mountains, through forests of cedar and rivers of darkness, would become the world's first great epic. But before that journey began, he was still just a man standing on his city walls, trembling before eternity. Inside the temple, Enheduanna continued her nightly prayer. She wrote of the gods not as distant rulers, but as reflections of the human soul, jealous, passionate, merciful, cruel. And through her words, the people of Sumer began to see themselves. Perhaps in Gilgamesh's fear of death, we hear the first human echo of our own hearts. The same whisper that has haunted every age since the longing to last, to be remembered, to find meaning before the darkness. Outside, the ziggurats' torches flickered. The crowd bowed their heads as the priests poured wine upon the altar. The flames hissed sparks, leaping into the night. Gilgamesh watched from the temple steps, his fists clenched. "If the gods will not grant immortality," he murmured, "then I will carve my name so deep into the world that even they cannot erase it." And so the myth began, born not of arrogance, but of the same fragile hope that binds us all. In the centuries that followed, clay tablets would preserve his tale, his friendship with Enkidu, his grief, his quest, his wisdom. But here in this moment, as Uruk shimmered beneath the stars, it was only a man staring into the unknown, and a priestess whose poetry turned human fear into divine art. The night deepened, the drums slowed, the torches dimmed, and from the heart of Uruk rose the sound of faith, not in the gods above, but in humanity itself. The legends of Gilgamesh echoed through the streets of Uruk, but beyond myths and temples, something even greater was taking shape, not in stone or in gold, but in thought. This was the age when the Sumerians began to invent everything. The world around them was alive with motion. The rivers swelled with trade boats. Fields shimmered with green barley. Artisans sang as they worked their clay and copper. Life demanded order, a way to measure, to remember, to build upon. And so humanity's first great spark of intellect caught fire. Inside a dim chamber lit by flickering oil lamps, a group of men sat cross-legged on the floor, clay tablets before them. They dipped reeds into wet earth and began pressing small wedge-shaped marks one after another, line by line. Each stroke captured a number, a transaction, a prayer. They called it cuneiform. The sound of the stylus tapping clay echoed like rain. A scribe named Lugal leaned over his tablet, sweat glistening under the lamplight. "We trade 100 jars of grain," he whispered to himself, inscribing symbols for quantity, for ownership, for time. The world outside was loud and unpredictable, but here, in the quiet glow of clay and light, humanity discovered control. With every mark on clay, they were building something greater than a city. They were building memory itself. Soon others followed. Merchants carried tablets wrapped in cloth, recording debts and promises. Temple priests wrote hymns for the gods, their words pressed forever into wet earth. For the first time, history had a voice that could not fade with the wind. One night, as Lugal packed away his tablets, his apprentice asked, "Do you think these symbols will last?" Lugal smiled faintly. "Longer than we will." And they did. The inventions multiplied. Across the fields, farmers used the first irrigation systems, channels, and gates, guiding the river's lifeblood into the soil. Under the blazing sun, men adjusted the flow water shimmering around their ankles. One looked up and said, "We command the rivers now." Further inland, another wonder rolled into being: the wheel. At first, it was simple, a potter's tool. But then no one knows who set that wheel upon an axle, and the world changed. Carts creaked across the plains, carrying goods, stone, and dreams from city to city. Even time itself began to take shape. The Sumerians looked to the stars and saw patterns: the sun's rise, the moon's turn, the rhythm of seasons. They divided circles into 60 parts, hours into 60 minutes, a system still ticking in every clock around the world today. In the evening, as the city slowed, musicians gathered in the courtyards. Flutes and lyres filled the air. A storyteller began to speak, not of kings or gods, but of simple people. The farmer who tamed the flood, the potter who found perfection in the wheel's spin, the scribe who turned words into eternity. His audience laughed, wept, and clapped, unaware that they were witnessing the birth of something timeless: culture. By torchlight, a young girl watched her father shape clay jars beside the river. "Why do we write? Why do we build?" she asked. He looked at her with tired eyes and said, "So the world remembers we were here." Above them, the night sky glittered like a vast tablet of stars. Every constellation, every flicker of light seemed to hum with human meaning. The Sumerians mapped the heavens, marking months, creating the first calendar. Time, once chaotic, now bowed to their understanding. The city thrived. Temples rose taller, markets, busier, voices louder. Yet, beneath it all, lay a quiet hum, the rhythm of invention, the heartbeat of civilization itself. Archaeologists thousands of years later would look back and call it a revolution. But for those who lived it, the scribes, the traders, the farmers, the dreamers, it was simply life unfolding, a steady march of human will against chaos. And so as the fires of Uruk flickered under the vast Mesopotamian sky, a new kind of immortality was born, not through kings or gods, but through creation. Every symbol pressed into clay, every wheel turned, every note of music carried across the night, all whispered the same truth, that to create is to defy forgetting. The Sumerians may have vanished into dust, but what they built, the written word, the measured hour, the first spark of science and art, became the foundation upon which every future stood. Their story was not just of survival. It was of brilliance, the dawn of everything we are. The fires of invention burned bright, but even the brightest flame leaves shadows. The rivers that once nourished Sumer began to betray it. Their waters, heavy with salt from years of irrigation, seeped into the soil. The fields that had once glowed gold with barley now turned pale and lifeless. Farmers stood under a gray sky, the earth cracking beneath their feet, and whispered to each other. The land no longer listens. The once mighty canals carved by generations filled with silt. The winds of the desert began to creep closer, grain by grain. And so the land that gave birth to civilization began to swallow it back. In the city of Ur, an old potter, perhaps the grandson of Aaron, packed his tools into a woven basket. Around him, the streets were quieter than they had ever been. The ziggurat still stood, but its steps were chipped and worn. The priests had stopped singing. The markets no longer hummed with trade. Families carried what they could: jars of water, scraps of cloth, clay tablets pressed with their names. He turned to his son and said, "The rivers that gave us life slowly took it away." War followed. Neighboring city-states, desperate for water and food, turned on one another. The sound of hammers building temples gave way to the clang of bronze blades. Smoke rose over Uruk, Lagash, and Kish, not from kilns, but from fire and ruin. The great cities of Sumer, once united by gods and trade, were now divided by hunger and fear. And then, as quickly as they had risen, they were gone, but not forgotten. For though the cities crumbled, their ideas refused to die. Like seeds scattered on the wind, they took root in the lands that followed in Babylon, Assyria, Persia, and beyond. The myths of Gilgamesh were told in new tongues. The stars, mapped by Sumerian priests, guided sailors across distant seas. Their numbers 60 minutes, 60 seconds continued to measure time long after their temples turned to dust. In the ruins, archaeologists would one day uncover the truth: clay tablets stacked in forgotten corners still legible after 5 millennia. On them, poems, prayers, laws, laughter, the very heartbeat of a people who refused to vanish. Through those marks, the Sumerians spoke again. One tablet read, "We built for the gods, but we built for ourselves." Another may, "Our words never fade." And they never did. The potter's grandson, now old and gray, once returned to the city's edge. The air was still. The rivers had shifted, carving new paths. He picked up a fragment of clay from the ground, a broken tablet, its edges smooth with time, and traced the faded wedge marks with his fingers. "You are still here," he whispered, "even if we are not." Centuries later, from those very ruins, Babylon would rise. Then Assyria, then Greece, then Rome, each building upon the same invisible foundation laid by hands long turned to dust. Cities, laws, stories, dreams, all of them, children of Sumer. The narrator's voice softens now. The music slows. And yet their greatest legacy was not brick or bronze. It was memory, the courage to write, to imagine, to dream beyond death. When we write, when we build, when we dream of eternity, we are all children of Sumer. The screen fades to the image of the twin rivers still winding through the land, quiet and endless. The sun sets in molten gold, reflecting on the rippling surface. The same water that once carried their dreams now carries ours. What will our civilization leave behind 5000 years from now? Will someone somewhere hold a fragment of what we built, a word, a song, a memory, and whisper, "You are still here"? The narrator pauses, letting silence breathe. History is not a straight line. It is a circle, carved in clay, rewritten in every generation. So as we remember Sumer, the first writers, the first dreamers, we remember ourselves. The light that began between two rivers still burns within every human story. If this tale moved, you share it. Let others hear it. Because when we keep their memory alive, we keep our own humanity alive too. This is not an ending. It is a return to the beginning.